Boudicca, queen of the Iceni tribe. Boudicca was the wife of Prasutagus, the king of the British Iceni tribe. After the king's death, Roman soldiers attacked, flogged Boudicca, and raped her daughters. The Romans believed this would subdue the Iceni, but they were a proud tribe, and Boudicca demanded vengeance. Romans did not accept women in power, but the Britons were comfortable and educated them in the use of weapons and strategies of war. Women occupying positions of respect and influence within tribes allowed Boudicca to approach the other British tribes to unite them to fight for freedom. Boudicca led the tribal force to attack and burn 3 settlements containing retired Roman soldiers. Men, women, and children were tortured and killed, showing Boudicca's desire for vengeance. Boudicca led the Britons into the final battle in 61 CE, but the Romans were more organized and slaughtered the tribes. It is assumed that Boudicca died in the defeat. The role of Boudicca in history was as a wife, a powerful queen, a victim, a leader, a warrior, and ultimately as a role model for women. There are no ancient British sources relating to the life of Boudicca. We have to rely on the writing of 2 Roman historians, Tacitus and Dio Cassius, writing 50 years apart and well after the revolt. Both historians agree that the Iceni king dies, but from that point on, Tacitus and Dio Cassius differ in what they believe. Dio Cassius states that money loaned to the Iceni caused the revolt. Tacitus, though, focuses on the humiliation and personal attack of Boudicca being flogged and her daughters being raped. Their perspective could differ, as neither historian was present through the revolt, and neither acknowledge eyewitness accounts. Both relied on secondary sources. Much of Tacitus' information came from his father-in-law Agricola, who was involved in the revolt, whereas Dio Cassius was writing 100 years after Boudicca and relied on past sources. Both historians were Roman and likely to be biased against the Britons. This can be seen with Dio Cassius blaming the Britons for the revolt, but it is interesting to note that Tacitus shows his bias against the early emperors because he believed there was corruption of power. Leader. The emphasis on who united the British tribes is also a point of difference in the 2 ancient accounts. Dio Cassius credits Boudicca for assembling an army by uniting tribes, but does not go into detail about how she does this. Tacitus does not mention Boudicca at all, and just tells us that the Tribunantes and others joined due to the common desire for freedom. Even though their perspectives differ, they would have both been influenced by what the Romans saw as the place of women in society. Roman men would be unlikely to follow women into war, so Tacitus may not have believed that Boudicca could convince British tribes to join her. Dio Cassius, though, says Boudicca must have possessed greater intelligence than often belongs to women, and this was why she was instrumental in forming their army. Dio Cassius and Tacitus had the same perspective on the attacks of the settlements. They both talk about the settlements being burned and the captives being tortured. Dio Cassius embellished more on the torture because, as a Roman, he wanted to make the Britons look like barbarians he thought they were. The similarities come because both the historians would have had access to the same official documents due to the positions they held. Both historians use speeches dramatically. They would have created the speech to match what they thought of the character of Boudicca and the situation. Tacitus emphasizes that Boudicca is female and is fighting for her lost freedom and her bruised body, and her outraged daughters. This shows her need for vengeance and his thoughts on the cause. Dio Cassius gives us the only physical description of Boudicca, saying she was tall, fierce, red hair to her hips, and a harsh voice. Both historians agreed on the chariot and spear to terrify opponents. As Romans, they both wanted to stereotype Boudicca as a barbarian and give a reason how a woman could have been defeating them.